All right, perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Excited to be here with you. Thank you for joining today. I'm Sutri Shipley, and today we are going to be talking about moving from mentorship to sponsorship and really leveling up your career growth ally actions. Before we get into that, just wanted to give you a quick heads up for what we're going to touch on today. So, first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. And then from there, just a very brief touch point on DEI. I like to level set in the beginning and what I mean when I say the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we're going to touch on allyship as well before getting to the meat of the session, which is what mentorship is compared to sponsorship and what building a sponsorship program can look like. And as I mentioned earlier, hopefully I'll be on time and we can have a few minutes for Q&A at the end as well. So please feel free to drop any questions in the chat or to hold on to those and take note, and we'll touch on those at the end as well. So, to get us going, a little bit more about me. So, Tree Shipley, my background is industrial organizational psychology, which is the science of human behavior in the workplace. So, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, I really focus on taking that data driven, intentional approach, but also centering humanity because I'm a psychologist and we love people. So, that's a little about me. I co wrote the book Inclusalytics, and it's about how DEI leaders use data to drive their work. And for fun, and because I'm sure he'll do weird stuff behind me while I'm presenting, this is my dog Winston, and he's the real boss around here. So love being able to tell people, who he is as he's rolling around. Everybody always asks. So as I said, I knew I'd get to tell you about me. I would really love if each of you could put a little bit about yourself in the chat as well. Love seeing that some of you have read the book. It's confusing. I got married since then, so it's Certrice Grice on the book, but same person, I promise. Yeah, excited to be here, and let's get going. Actually, one quick question before we go too far. I have a poll here, and I'm just curious if, for those of you here, if you currently have a mentorship or sponsorship program in your organization, want to get a feel for experience that people have. So just going to give a second for everybody to respond to that. Y'all are quick, seeing those pop in real fast. Got two more people. I go them a few more seconds in case they weren't by the button. All right. Perfect. So I'm going to end that and I'll let you see the results here. It looks like some of you have mentorship, which is where a lot start. A couple of you have both programs already. So when we get to the end, would love to hear your perspective for those of you who have. And then most of you, though, have not had a sponsorship or mentorship program. You might be thinking about it or, haven't had a conversation. So hopefully today is helpful for you to get to learn a little bit more about what these programs can look like and their benefits and their challenges. Again, I'm going to share my perspective from research that I've done, but I would love to hear from those of you who answered yes as well when we get to a time where we can chat. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in and start with DEI. As I said, I like to just level set a little bit. I know y'all have been in this space, so you're all probably thinking, girl, we know what diversity, equity, inclusion is, but we all don't use those words the same all the time, right? So for me, when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about a measure of difference in a group. I mentioned I like data, right? It's simply a statistic. How much difference is in the group or lack thereof. That's it. It's not about a certain identity or anything like that. And then on the other hand, when we talk about inclusion, this is an individual level behavior. Inclusion is a verb, it's what we do, right? So it's how we treat each other. And then if inclusion is at that individual level, equity is at an organizational level. So equity is how we elevate those who have historically been left behind through our policies, practices, and procedures, right? And so if we pull all of this together and we're talking about DEI, we're saying, is there difference in the room, right? In the team, in the group, in the organization? How is the organization supporting each person through policies, practices, procedures? Is it giving resources so everyone can thrive? Inclusion, how is each person in that organization treating each other? And when we have all of those, we'll get to higher feelings of belonging. And that's feeling valued, respected, seen, and heard, right? That's our goal when we talk about this. Again, the scientist in me, that's our outcome variable. It's belonging. That's what we're looking for. So again, just wanted to give this framing to you because today we're going to largely be focusing on the concept of inclusion and what that can look like. So several of you said you know about the book. I was formerly co-owner of Mattingly Solutions with Victoria Mattingly, good friend of mine. And while there, we developed the inclusive behavior pyramid. And so with this inclusive behavior pyramid, the bottom layer, right, is everyday inclusion. And as I said, when we think about inclusion, we should think about a verb, actions that we're taking. So everyday inclusion would really be micro affirmations, those small everyday behaviors that make others feel valued, respected, seen, and heard. And it's important to make sure you start with that foundation before building up to the higher levels, right? So from there, you can start thinking about inclusive leadership. And then at the very top of the pyramid is allyship. And that's where we're going to be focusing on today. Again, I'm sure you all have put in a lot of work on those lower levels, but allyship is where a lot of organizations are starting to move toward and realizing, okay, what is the next step for us? How do we advocate for more inclusive behaviors in our organization? And what does that look like? What does that mean? So, what is allyship? That's another one of those words where it gets thrown around a lot. Everybody uses it a little differently. For those of you who are watching this live, I'd love if you could drop an emoji reaction with how you feel about the word allyship. Because I know some people like the word allyship, some people dislike the word. You know, they feel like it's surface level or performative. Some feel like it's been misused. Some think there are other better words. So, go ahead and drop an emoji. You can either do the emoji reaction button or put it in chat, but would love to kind of get your perspective on that word for those of you here. And while you put that in there, I'm going to tell you about how I think about allyship and what it means to me and why I still like the word. So, allyship, it is an ongoing relationship between an ally and their partner working together toward the shared goal of fairness, equity, and social justice. Key being together. Right. So I think that's one of the things that happens with the word allyship is it's been misused because people so often just focus on the ally. They don't remember the partner, right? They don't remember that person they're supposed to be supporting, and they don't always remember to bring them along for the ride, for the conversation. And so there's two keys here. One, we said allyship is a part of the inclusive behavior pyramid. And since it's inclusion, that means it's a behavior, it's a verb. So there has to be action tied with you being an ally, right? So that's one key piece. And then the other is, as I said, that it's a partnership. We should really be including that individual or community that you're trying to support as an ally in the conversation. And so another way we can think of this with allyship is that allies use their power and status to support and advocate for someone who doesn't share a key part of their identity, right? So these are more key pieces. To be an ally, you have to have access to power and status. Right. And that can look different in different contexts, different scenarios. And there may be some times where you're an ally. There may be some times where you're a partner, but it just depends on in that specific situation who has access to power that they can use to support another person, right? And so that's the next piece, the support. And the key part of your identity, that's where the power comes in, right? Is that you have access to power because of that identity you have. And that's where you can support another person. So historically, when we look at society, especially in the United States, right, men have typically had more power than women. So we hear about that kind of allyship a lot. White people have had more power historically than people of color. So we hear about that a lot. But there are other ways that we can see this that often get overlooked, right? Are you an able bodied person? Is English your native language in America, right? That makes things easier. In your organization, do you have longer tenure? Are you in a higher position in the organization, right? These are all things that give you access to power that you can then use to be an ally and support those who don't match that key part of your identity. So, wanted again to touch on these pieces around allyship a little bit before getting into mentorship and sponsorship, just to level set, just to understand. And so I do have. Oh, actually, I have one more thing here we can touch on before we get there. So with allyship, another thing we can think of is the traits, right? What do these people need to think of and consider to be a good ally, but also a good partner, because he said we have to remember both sides, right? So with an ally, it's important that you're curious. You have to be curious without making the other person a curiosity, right? So someone in the chat said genuine allyship. Going and genuinely being curious about who a person is, what their goals are, what their struggles have been, learning who they are as an individual helps you better to be able to support them, right? Compared to just saying, oh, because you are this identity, I know you have this need, right? Not everyone's the same. So having that genuine curiosity, getting to know them will help you be a better ally. Also having humility, understanding that you don't know it all, even if you've attended talks like this one, right? So being able to, or being willing to go out and learn more. And then lastly, having courage, because when we talk about inclusion, we said that, that base level everyday inclusion, micro affirmations, those tend to be basic. Can you get someone's name right? Right? Can you use the right pronouns? Can you give eye contact? Things like that. But when it comes to allyship, we should take it a step further, and that can come with some risk for you. And that's where allyship gets harder, right? Maybe it is speaking up in a situation that could make you be viewed differently. Maybe it's putting your name on the line. We're going to talk about that. So there's courage tied to being a successful ally. Now, on the partner side, right, there's some things we need to do too. I'm sure many of us in this room have been a partner who's on the receiving end of allyship, right? And some of this hopefully resonates. You had to be self aware. If they're going to be curious, we have to understand what our strengths are, what our opportunities are, what we're looking for, what support can do for us. So, having that time to self reflect and be self aware on where we are and where we want to go. We have to be trusting, which can be pretty hard when we're on the partner side of allyship, right? Especially if we've had bad encounters with potential allies in the past. So it takes a lot to be vulnerable and open up to that ally for that support. And then lastly is bias for action. We have to be ready to show up and show out. If that ally comes to you and they give you opportunities, you have to be willing to grab that and really charge forward with it. So these are some more specific personality traits to consider to help you in doing the ally actions or partner actions in an ally relationship. And what you'll notice too is while I have these three listed under each, they also will be relevant on the other side. So an ally should also be self-aware, trusting, and have a bias for action, and a partner should have curiosity, humility, and courage as well. So, let's start shifting though into our core concept of today, and how does this relate to allyship, right? We came in here to talk mentorship and sponsorship, and I started us 3 steps away. So we talked about what inclusion is. We know allyship is an inclusive behavior. Well, mentorship and sponsorship are more specific examples of what allyship can look like in action. So with this grid, you'll notice 2 things. One, when we think about allyship in action, it can either be an ongoing relationship or it can be something that happens quick and in the moment. It can also be at that one-on-one level, like we talked about, right? Getting to know someone personally and building a relationship, or it can get to a group level. And when we move to that group level, that shifts us more into the advocacy space, right? But it's so important that we start with that individual level, because then we can notice trends and patterns that will better support us in supporting at a group level. And so there's some examples in here of what that can look like when you're thinking, one-on-one in the moment. That could be centering someone or amplifying their contributions. When we're in the moment and at the group level, it might be you're in a meeting and you realize, wait, we're treating this group a certain way. We should do things differently. Ongoing, it could be work petitioning internally for better policies to have an impact on larger groups. But what we're going to focus on today is ongoing one-on-one allyship, which is where mentorship and sponsorship comes in. All right. Also, loving the chat conversation, so please keep that going. All right. So, mentorship and sponsorship. Let's define what those are. When we talk about mentorship, it is a relationship in which a more knowledgeable person or an experienced person who would be the mentor, right, guides and nurtures the professional development of a less experienced person who is the mentee in that situation. And so, what you'll notice here with a mentor is it's not necessarily based on tenure or age, it's about their knowledge, right? Do they have something that can help develop this other individual? And this is also typically gonna can occur outside of a normal manager and subordinate relationship, but it can also just be a manager if they have that capacity to go a little further and help that person develop. Now, on the sponsorship side, and sometimes people think this means legal or financial sponsorship, but we're talking about this in the sense of allyship. So, in that sense, sponsorship is a relationship in which a person, who we're going to refer to as the sponsor, uses their power and status to produce objective career benefits for the person who they're sponsoring. And we're going to refer to that person as their protege in this situation. And so the key here, the key difference between these two is that sponsorship is more about, or sorry, mentorship is more about developing a person, and sponsorship is about their career advancement. Right? It's getting them in the door, getting them access to opportunity. So I have another image here. This is the definition, but I have another way to look at this to break it down. So let's pause on this screen and then I'll chat for a little bit here. So, when we think of the role, right, a mentor, they are providing advice and support. But the onus of the relationship is still on the mentee to take that and do the self development, right? The mentee is really driving that relationship. But when we think of a sponsor, their role is to advocate for their protege on their behalf so they get access to opportunity. So, really, the onus of that relationship and sponsorship is on the sponsor, not on the protege. It's on the sponsor to open those doors, right? They really have to take the lead. Um, and the focus for mentorship is really, again, it's that personal or professional development, whereas with sponsorship, it's that career acceleration, getting the access to opportunities. And there's benefits on both sides. With mentorship, both parties may get some benefit, but definitely it's about the mentees having that direct support and development. And then on the sponsorship side, sponsors are investing their credibility and reputation for the success of their proteges. So their proteges getting that benefit for, again, the access to opportunity, but the sponsor is also going to get some benefits in being able to say, hey, you sponsored this person, said they were great, and they were, so now we have even more trust in you as well. So there's definitely benefits on both sides of mentorship and sponsorship, and both for mentees and sponsors. Um, and so, one other thing I wanted to throw out, because I like data, like I said, is just some stats here. And research has found that employees with sponsors are 19 to 23% more likely to move up in their roles compared to those unsponsored counterparts. And workplace sponsorship ensures that high performing employees get development opportunities that are tailored to them and really unlock things like, again, when I do my research, you see all kinds of benefits. Stretch projects can be one, to help the sponsee, the protege get more access to different options in an organization. Could be networking so they can meet the right people who can help further their career. Similarly, just visibility to new opportunities. And it could also get them even pay raises, right? Sponsors can help advocate for them getting what they deserve in their position. Um, so what we also found in research, because another question I get here is, is sponsorship and mentorship really that different? Can't they happen in one? And research has shown that it doesn't always happen the same men for for men who are mentored compared to women who are mentored, right? And so you've probably heard the phrase women are over mentored and under sponsored. And research has found that when men receive mentorship, they were more likely to actually be receiving sponsorship, whereas women were more likely to be receiving mentorship. And so that's where it wasn't helping them in that career advancement as much. It was so focused on just the personal development. So just some other facts and figures that we've seen here, but let's talk a little bit more specifically about what the actions can look like, because again, that's what we care about, right? It's what are we doing here? And so My buttons work. There we go. All right. So a mentor, they are helping you understand who your professional self is, identifying your preferred operating style, understanding when you might need to change, right? And what you maybe think your strength is and maybe it's not. It's also a safe space for you to express fatigue and frustration and doubt. Yeah, being able to have these conversations without fear of a negative career impact, right? That you can go and talk about your areas for growth in a safe manner. Whereas on the sponsor side, they are helping you plan your next role and obtain those career development opportunities, right? They're pushing for you and the organization, speaking on your behalf. They are supporting you as you take charge, right? If you get that stretch assignment or you get that promotion, they still stand by you to make sure you feel comfortable in showing up. They're endorsing you publicly, right? So again, that's the courage piece we talked about. They're willing to put their name on the line for you. And they're championing on your behalf to those who have access to power to get you where you want to be in that organization. And so, again, while both have their place, it's clear that there's different priorities for both. And that's why it's important to think of them separately. Because when we try and think of them together, it can off one can fall off, right? So figuring out what is it that that person specifically needs and then how can they support them. All right. Oh, that's a great question, Deborah, and I will come back to that for Q&A. So then, see what my time is looking at. Okay, great. So this is good here on what the actions look like, but I want to now pause on talking about mentorship because that's not our core goal today and dig deeper specifically into sponsorship and the roles of proteges and sponsors. So let's start with proteges. Now, a protege in a sponsorship program should be someone who is already high performing, right? This person is career driven, they are ready to take the next step in their professional journey, and while they maybe are already experiencing success and they've demonstrated that in their current role, they're not getting the access that they want, right? So, sponsorship will help them get visibility, advocacy, and more opportunities necessary to help them accelerate their career advancement. And a successful protege is someone who has already taken the effort to define their career goals. They know where they want to go. They've maybe sought out some development opportunities already, and now they're prepared to partner, right, with that ally, with their sponsor, to get strategic guidance and sponsorship and support to move forward. And to ensure that your program supports the right talent at the right stage in the career, there's a lot of criteria that can be put in place if you have a formal sponsorship program to narrow down for proteges who's eligible for that. And so some of those things include, maybe there's a minimum amount of tenure that you want them to have before they go through your sponsorship program to make sure they're familiar with the organization. It could also be things like a certain job level that comes up. It could be something like not having them on a performance improvement plan, right? Because if we're advocating for them, we want them to advance, they have to already be showing up well. So there's a number of different things that can be put in place when selecting proteges in a more formal program. And also making sure that they understand, again, what their role is and what that entails from things like a time commitment, right? How often are they going to be expected to interact with their sponsor? Are there different trainings involved in this situation or coaching that came up in chat, right? So what does that look like? So those are a few different things there with with proteges. And then on the sponsor side, oh, my buttons. There we go. On the sponsor side, these should be individuals who are, again, they want to be an ally. They want to support others in the organization. Maybe they already have experience with mentorship, but they're ready to grow and go a little further than just helping with professional development and take it to that next step. They wanted that more hands-on approach to helping to guide this person in their career growth. Again, similar with the proteges, there's a lot of different criteria you can consider in a formal sponsorship program, and that could be again, what's their level? If they have access to opportunity, they have that power and status to be an ally, they maybe need to be a director level or higher, or maybe it's your VPs and higher. It'll depend on your organization, right? They also should have probably longer standing tenure in the organization because we want them to have that power, that impact, that buy-in. So when they make a statement, it's really carries some weight. And similarly, again, we want them performing well, right? They can't be on a PIP either, and they have to be prepared to commit time to this. And this is one of the hardest things. We're going to talk challenges a bit more in a few, but one of the hardest parts of a successful formal sponsorship program is simply having sponsors who can show up. Because I just said they need to be higher in the organization, right? And we all know how busy our top leaders can get. And so it takes a lot. This is again where being an ally, it takes some courage, it takes some risk on your part. You have to decenter yourself and prioritize this other person. Another thing that can be helpful with your sponsors is just making sure they're trained up, right? They've had some conversations, they understand what it means to be an ally, right? They understand how to support someone, how to be there for them without overstepping, right? How to be genuinely curious and things like that. So, those are some of the tips there around a role of a sponsor and what that can look like. But just one more piece here before we dig into the program itself a little bit more to talk about how a sponsor and how proteges can be successful. So, with sponsors, they can be successful through being proactive, right, and advocating for their protege. They should be out looking for opportunities and actively engaging their peers to help gain visibility for their proteges. They should be nominating them for high impact projects or leadership programs or promotions while ensuring that they also can get in the room where key decisions are being made, right? That advocacy can't be left just to chance. That's not sponsorship. Sponsorship is being more intentional about it. They should also be willing and ready to provide constructive feedback and development opportunities. Yes, development is largely mentorship, like I said, but we all can learn and grow all the time, right? So as you're moving them into opportunities, it might be helpful to say, hey, here's an adjustment you could make that'll help you better with this specific opportunity we're talking about, right? So being able to have those conversations. It's also leveraging their network. So, again, giving them access to opportunity, encouraging risk taking, helping their protege understand it's okay to step out of your comfort zone, right? When they tell you what their goals are, where they want to go, you may say, hey, actually, you didn't mention this, but if you do X, Y, and Z, it could help you to get here. And that may be out of your comfort zone, but it's okay. Having those kinds of intentional conversations. And then, of course, we want them role modeling inclusive behaviors and what that looks like for others. So that way, hopefully, more leaders will then realize, oh, this sponsorship thing is beneficial. I can see how it brings them joy, right, in their work, and it's also benefiting the organization. Maybe I want to step up and also be a sponsor. So we want them to be role models for this program too. Now, with the proteges, again, we need that self awareness. So they have to clearly articulate what their career goals are and their aspirations because their sponsors can only advocate effectively if they truly understand where that protege wants to go. So they have to be able to express their long term career goals and ambitions. Um, this is going to help them be able to get better support. They also need to understand what their unique value proposition is, right? Because there's a lot of people who might be wanting to also move forward. So what makes you stand out? And that'll help the sponsor know how to advocate for you as a protege. So there has to be a clear understanding of your strengths, your skills, and your contributions to the company. And then they need to be ready to actively seek out feedback. We said that the sponsor has to provide it. The protege has to be ready to receive it. And I saw a comment in chat about feedback as a gift, no matter how it's wrapped. And it's so true, right? But we have to prepare our proteges to really believe that and take that in. And so there's a lot of different ways that that can show up. The next one here was demonstrating initiative. So again, ready to step up and really show out of, here's who I am and here's my benefit. And then lastly here is exhibit leadership principles. So, especially if they're trying to move up in an organization, they have to be able to show, here's my strengths, here are my leadership qualities, especially leadership qualities that your specific organization may be looking for. So again, sponsorship is a powerful tool for career acceleration, but its success is definitely going to depend on both parties being engaged, proactive, and committed to this work. Sponsors have to do this active advocacy, but the proteges must also take ownership of those opportunities and consistently demonstrate their potential, right? But when approached with intentionality and strategic effort, sponsorship really creates opportunities. It helps break down barriers and overall builds a stronger and more diverse leadership pipeline, right? Because that's our key. We want to get people in here whose talent we have, internal talent we have that is currently being overlooked, right? Talent that's interested in progressing, but for some reason they're being left behind. That's the benefit of a sponsorship program. It can really help them move forward. Quick side note to say, I've been in the employee listening space for over 8 years and started specifically doing surveys. I still do a number of surveys today. And whenever we ask the question, are you satisfied with your career growth opportunities? It's a low item, right? In every organization, employees want to know that you care about their development and that you're putting in efforts to support them to get where they want to be in the organization. And because of that, having a program like this, right, a sponsorship program that is specifically around helping them to progress could help them feel that way, right? It can help them feel that you truly care as an organization about their opportunity to advance. So, with that in mind, let's dig a little deeper into building a sponsorship program. Now, I know a couple of you said that you already have a program. Some of you have a mentorship program, and they're similar. So, some of this will seem familiar. But then some of you haven't yet. So, maybe you're not familiar. So, I have this little cheat sheet here of things to consider when you're setting up your program. And side note to say, there will be a recording of this. You will also have access to these slides. And this particular graphic comes with it has a PDF version of it as well that you can download. So don't worry about trying to screenshot this. I know the text is kind of tiny. You can get a better version, is all I wanted to say. But with that in mind, step one to consider is defining the overall purpose and goals of your program, right? So, how is it different from mentorship if you already do have a mentorship program? Making sure that's really clear. What are your objectives? Is it because you want to increase diversity at the top levels of your organization? Is it that you're wanting to improve retention, right? You want people to stay longer? Is it that you want more access to opportunity? What is your core goal? And then in here, this is also where you can start developing the program structure and size. How many people can go through this program at a time? How long will it be? Typically it's around a year, sometimes it's a year and a half, things like that. So that's the first piece. Oh, and how are they expecting to continue their relationship? That's another big one that can come up there. And then the next one here we have is developing program messaging. And so with that, it's it's communicating what the program is. You're gonna have to go on a roadshow, right? Say this is a new program we have. Here's who we're targeting. Yes, everyone's invited to apply. We only have this much space, right? How does it benefit you as a protege? How does it benefit you as a sponsor? Because you need a lot, right? You need a lot of people in. Actually, one recommendation we have is to have twice as many sponsors in your pool as you have proteges, because sometimes pairings don't work out or someone leaves. So having a backup plan is an option, right? So when you're developing your program messaging, it's going to be really key to help you with attracting people to take part. And then from there, establishing criteria for participants. So we touched on that one a little bit, right? Some of the criteria around both proteges and sponsors, how tenure is a very common one, not being on a performance improvement plan, and then job level is another one. But you really could put in anything you want here. I have a colleague of mine, Kate Scott from Teradata, who is one of the people I chatted to a lot when I was doing all of my sponsorship research. And they had gone through a McKinsey accelerator program and for their leadership. And so their sponsors all had to have completed that program before they could be a sponsor. So there's all kinds of criteria that could be put in place, right? And then after that, also figuring out what is actually in your program. So some things here that to consider and that are very common is one, having training for both sponsors and proteges at the beginning of the program so they understand how to be the best sponsor they can be and how to be the best protege they can be. Having expectations for how often they meet. Yes, they can meet more, but having a minimum goal, right? So they know the time commitment. Having roundtable discussions. This one really came up in a lot of my conversations as something that was really beneficial. And that was space where the sponsors can all get together and discuss what it's been like showing up as sponsors, and the proteges can all get together and discuss what it was like. So that was one, and just making sure other resources are available. So I had a question in here about coaching and how that comes in. This actually is probably a good place to chat about it. So when we think of coaches, right, there's someone who is advising us and helping us with our development. I would say coaching is much closer to mentorship, where it's that professional development, because a sponsor has to have access to opportunity to be able to advocate for you and get you in the right conversations, right? This is another question I get is, can sponsors exist outside of our organization? And on the one hand, kind of, right? If you're looking for growth anywhere, then yes, you could have a sponsor outside of your organization because they might get you access in a different place. But if you are looking for internal growth, then you need an internal sponsor, someone who has that power to advocate for you internal with the people, the leaders in the spaces that you want to be in. And so with that in mind, the back to the coach's point, that's something that is often an optional add-on in sponsorship programs is coaching for the sponsor or coaching for the protege if that's something they need to be more successful. And then I mentioned to y'all, IO psychologist, right? It's a STEM field. We love data. So it's so important to make sure when you're building your program, that you consider this at the beginning. How are you going to track and measure success? So for one, pre, mid, and post program surveys to hear directly from not only the proteges, but the sponsors, right? On how was this beneficial? Measuring things like the org satisfaction, intent to stay, things like that. So you can see, and simple questions of, was this beneficial going through this? So getting their face validity of the program, their understanding of did they think it was valuable, but also the impact on their experience as an employee is what we can get from that survey. But then outside of that, there's a number of tangible things that you can measure, and this ties back to your original goals you discussed, right? So if it was increasing diversity in leadership, you can start looking to see what's the makeup of people who did move up afterward, right? And this is not me saying you're giving people roles based on their identity, but it's just seeing who do we have, right? It's simple. Again, diversity is just a statistic, so measuring that. It could also be measuring promotions for the people in the program, the stretch projects, retention again is a really big one. So are those people staying compare and what's that rate look like compared to those who aren't in the program? There's a lot of different potential things that you can track and measure for success in this space. And then lastly, we did also note qualitative feedback too. It's important to just talk to people. So that being said, those are some of the key things to consider if you're one of the people who said, no, we don't have one yet, but we're thinking about building one. So definitely be sure to just keep all these different steps in mind and feel free to use this as a resource as you do that as well. And be sure to get help. That was another thing that came up a lot in my conversations is people who do this tended to have a full head count who was able to support, or they had an external consultant who could come in and support in developing this program, but then also in maintaining it over time. So it's not a very hard thing necessarily, right? This is pretty straightforward, but you can see where it can be a pretty high time commitment to get this laid out the first time around. So one more slide here around the foundation, and then we're gonna get to Q&A here in a moment. I saw at least one question come through, so please feel free to start, keep jotting those in chat. But when getting started, just one more time, what should we consider? First, assess your organization's readiness. Are they ready to talk about sponsorship? As I said, allyship is at the top of the pyramid, right? So have you established a baseline of inclusion being a behavior and what those small behaviors are you expect? Have you worked with them on how they show up as an inclusive leader before we ask them to now go and put themselves on a ledge to be an ally and be a sponsor? Also, again, there's time and money tied to this, right? So are they ready to make that kind of commitment to career development in that way? Once you assess your organization's readiness, you're feeling good, identify some leaders to go through a pilot program, right? Test it out. Who are some people you can count on who you think will, one, show up well as sponsors, but two, also give you really good feedback on the program itself and how to improve it moving forward, right? For that first round. Then from there, developing those guidelines. We just talked about a lot of those pieces, developing some training, really building out the program. That can happen here, making sure you have it. I alluded to this already. It's so important to pilot it. Don't go too far, right? Don't go too big just to start. Pick a group of maybe 10 people that you think you can manage. Or if you're a smaller organization, maybe it's just five, to do a first round, track some data, and then come back and revisit. Did we build this in a way that's good for our current plan? Does it um, interact well with existing programs we have? Maybe you have a high potential program already or a mentorship program. How did these connect? What's your succession planning like? Did it connect well? Did it lead to the outcomes we wanted? What did the participants say? So that pilot gives you an opportunity to collect more data before you grow the program. And then from there, it's important that you just establish that sponsorship is a core leadership responsibility and helping them understand that this is just an expectation you have of the leaders in your organization. So these are some things to consider as you get started. I've talked a lot from a technical functional side on sponsorship. I do have one more slide for us here, and that's the challenges. It's important that we don't overlook this part, right? Because I did just talk about how great it can be and beneficial, but it is also helpful for us to think realistically about what could get in the way, and maybe this isn't the right step for us, right? So first is a lack of awareness and understanding. So again, not understanding what sponsorship is compared to things like mentorship or coaching. So making sure you lead the organization to understand what this is, what your program will be. Another one is personal risk. So I've talked about risk a little bit, right? Sponsors have to put their reputations on the line by vouching for their proteges, which makes sponsorship a high risk commitment compared to other things. And so in a lot of risk-averse organizations, your leaders might hesitate to sponsor someone. They may be like, I don't really know that person. I don't have that personal connection, so I'm not willing to really put myself on the line here. And so that can be something that can get in the way of a successful sponsorship program. So something that can really help with this concern though is again normalizing sponsorship as a leadership responsibility rather than it being individual risk. If everyone understands that all leaders are expected to do this, it makes it a little less scary. And you can do that by embedding it in things like your succession planning conversations. Another one here is the time commitment. We touched on that one Obviously, it requires sustained engagement over an extended period of time. Your leaders have to show up, as we talked about. So, with their demanding schedules, this can feel like a lot to put on top of it. But again, to help with this side, it's just making sure the expectations are set up front of what that time commitment can look like. And also you being realistic. Maybe they don't need to meet every week, right? Maybe they're checking in once a month. How can you make this something that's manageable when you structure the program? Another challenge can be building those genuine relationships, right? So these sponsorship programs, it's about building relationships that are relational, not necessarily just transactional. They have to build trust and mutual respect. But not everyone is like that. And so it's important, again, that's where maybe coaching and training for the sponsor or for the protege can be really beneficial in helping them understand how to be vulnerable and open up to each other. Another piece is affinity bias, and this ties into some of what we talked about already. Um, and that's that around the genuine relationships, right? With affinity bias, we tend to have a preference for those who have a similar background, or maybe look like us, remind us of each other. That's why a sponsorship program actually has benefit in the first place, because we tend to have informal sponsorship with those who we are familiar with and who we relate to. And so, with that, we could miss a lot of people. So, having this formal sponsorship program can help us move past that barrier of or affinity bias. Excuse me. And then the last one here is imposter syndrome. And so, proteges, this is for you, right? That can be the challenge here with sponsorship is those proteges who are worried about, do I truly belong here? Can I really be successful? And so helping them understand that sponsorship is equitable, intentional, and inclusive. You are here because you're high performing. You're here because you want to advance. We want to make sure that you're seeing the opportunity and can do what you want to do there. So again, just wanted to be clear that there are some challenges to consider. While, yes, there are a lot of benefits to sponsorship, there are things that could get in the way. So you do have to think pretty deeply before deciding to go this route. All right. So with that, I'm not going to really go through this, but I had a key takeaway slide for later when you get this PowerPoint. Reminds you what inclusion is, allyship, how mentorship and sponsorship are different, what a successful protege is, and then the key notes with building a sponsorship program. Now I clicked through that pretty quick because we have about 9 minutes left. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. And so with that, while we do Q&A, I told y'all I like data. I'm also going to drop this link in chat let me do this. So I'm also going to drop this link in chat. It is a feedback survey. Would love to hear your thoughts on how this presentation went. It helps me grow as a facilitator, but hopefully you enjoyed the session. I am going to go ahead and stop recording for now, so that way we can do Q&A, and you can feel free to come off mute even. We can have a little conversation. You know what? I stopped sharing. I'm going to stop recording.